Bob stood for black history, black culture, black awareness, black progress, black struggle.
It's a dust. Oh yeah. Movement of the people.
Bob Marley said something a cut above the rest, and it's the more you analyse it, the harder it is sometimes to find out what it was.
When you see your light.
At the time, people were looking for somebody who was going to articulate their woes or their ills. He did that well.
Through the roads of creation.
Immense presence that he just lit up a room, you know, just energy, you know. He was totally connected.
This was not just another recording artist. This is a man who had his own thing, exactly what he was going to say. He wasn't going to compromise for anybody, and he was going to live and die by it.
Reggae music, I think I'm satisfied. You know, I'm satisfied with what reggae music has done for a lot of people. You know, the music reggae, which is bigger than me, Bunny Wailer, it's bigger than Bob, it's bigger than anyone else that is dealing with it. Reggae is bigger. The music is that's the power. We are only like fuse, getting current from this power, you know.
The original Wailers worked well, Peter, Bob and Bunny, because there was 3 different voices. There was 2 baritones and a tenor. So the 3 dynamics working within this worked well as a harmony group, because the way Jamaicans sung, or the classic Jamaican harmony of the time, would involve swapping leads. So what you really had was 3 lead characters who were working together.
The Wailing Wailers album, which is the first record that comes out, and in fact they're singles really, is done at Studio One, and it uses the Studio One musicians, notably the Scatterlights, a form of the Scatterlights anyway. So obviously it's a ska record. That's the prevalent mood of the time. That, I guess, is the kind of beginnings, you know, of the Wailers, or Bob and the Wailers, as conscious individuals.
First time I heard a Bob Marley record was through parties that the West Indian communities used to have during like Friday night and Saturday nights, or blues parties. And his music was starting to filter through as being a new voice of coming out of Jamaica, a new rebel voice. And everybody was really excited. And I used to see like all the older people sort of moving around and jumping up and down to all those tunes. And there was something about his music and about his voice which really appealed to people.
The real difference between the Wailers as the Wailing Wailers that people know, and then what people know next, which was, I suppose, roots reggae Wailers, was really 10 years. There was such an evolution in reggae at the time. They were going with the flow. It was in the early 60s, ska was what people did. If you look at pictures of them, they've got sharp little suits on, they're posing like the Impressions, they're singing as close to the Impressions as they possibly can, you know, and done a lot of cover versions, and it was what people did in Jamaica at the time, you know. Then the Roots Revolution happened at the end of the 60s, and they went along with that. In between, there was a fair amount of rocksteady and what you'd call classic reggae, the stuff they did with Lee Perry. He did an awful lot to define their sound away from quasi-American to something that actually brought their own characters out, and that was really down to him experimenting with their their vocal arrangements, moving them about, even singing bits. I mean, a lot of people in Jamaica in the Jamaican music business, will say that Lee Perry taught the Wailers to sing. That's probably a bit of an exaggeration, but he certainly brought the best out of them. He also worked with them to help their songwriting. He encouraged them to go round and look at things and write about what they saw and not write about what they might imagine was happening in America.
Concrete jungle is his experience, you know, stuff like that. He lived these things. So he was talking as a person that lived it, which there are millions of other people around the world that lives it. So they have the same experience he had. So when they hear it, they say, but damn, that's like them saying it.
Like my father used to take, we go down in the ghettos and we used to meet many what you call maybe gangsters or what have you. Bad man. But who was a good man still. Yeah, and that was a political thing. We used to know that we used to have Claude Bucky Marshall, man like Tech Clive and Froze and some of them, man, you know? So that was a political part of it.
With the next Wailers era, if you like, which was Signing to Ireland, which was the Chris Blackwell era, there was all sorts of stories about, and Jimmy Cliff has told me that Blackwell tried to sign Jimmy Cliff in the wake of The Harder They Come because Jimmy had become an international star, the soundtrack had done really well on Ireland, but he wasn't interested. He didn't want to sign for Blackwell. So Black was looking for another Jamaican group or Jamaican act to essentially to try and launch as a world stars.
When I met him, I much more conceived of him as a rock artist than of a reggae artist. In the sense, I felt that the presence that he had when I met him that time, I felt that he could be as big as Jimi Hendrix. I remember feeling at the time, though at the time it seemed an absurd statement to make.
He came across the Wailers. They were stranded in London when someone had let them down and needed an advance from him in order to get home. They were stuck in a house in Neasden, had no money, someone had let them down. They took a couple of grand off Chris Blackwell to get home and promised him an album. Blackwell, I think, is on record of saying he never expected to see them again. But sure enough, they delivered the album, which became Catch a Fire.
I don't think there was a particular vision at Ireland for reggae. I mean, opinions vary as to how faithful Chris and supportive Chris was to the Jamaican music industry. Personally, my personal viewpoint is that he was extremely supportive to it and helped it get a much bigger audience in the wider world. A lot of the reggae stuff that came through was 4-track tapes. Some of it was very poppy. Reggae hadn't really sort of found its feet in terms of where was it going to sit. I think as far as the sound that Chris was after, you'd probably have to ask him that question, but my understanding of it, the way that he conveyed it to me was he just had this feeling that if we brought in a couple of the rock musicians that were around and about, a couple of them from America and a couple of them from the UK, that it would be interesting to bring into the reggae some influences that might give it more accessibility for the white middle class radio audience, if you like. So it wasn't a matter of making it palatable for them, it was more a matter of just giving them a way to kind of understand what was going on. It was just a matter of really taking this very, very basic reggae album and giving it a little bit of polish, but not too much.
He sped them up slightly. He flattened the rhythm patterns out, or straightened the rhythm patterns out, so they were much easier for, say, a Western audience or a rock audience to follow. Then he overdubbed, or had overdubbed, clavinet and guitar on top by a couple of kind of rock stroke blues musicians. This was done afterwards, and as a result was something that was kind of rock music with a reggae beat.
Stir it up, little darling, stir it up.
Bob came over and we worked with him on it. He redid some vocals, and Bob was very, very heavily involved in the whole process, and that was the fantastic thing about it, was that, you know, his very kind of easy, laconic style, and working on this, you never felt that you were intruding on his music. You always felt that you were exploring it and trying to find new facets.
There wasn't a lot changed in the way the Wailers sung it. I mean, different characters sung different songs, different leads. They harmonised pretty much the same. It was all really in the instrumentation and the packaging of that particular album, because once you got them on stage, they did pretty much what they were going to do. You know, there's Old Grey Whistle Test footage of the Wailers performing around that time, and it sounds pretty much like the album without the overdubs.
No sun will shine in my day today. No sun will shine. The high yellow moon won't come out to play. I said, darkness has covered my light, and has changed my day to night.
So Catch a Fire is in fact a huge critical hit, but it only sells 15,000 copies. Over the years, however, it's sold over 1 million. I think it was about 1995 before it got to 1 million, but it certainly has sold that number. And I think it is seen as, yeah, it's definitely a landmark album, and it's seen as the very first salvo from the Wailers, what was to become Bob Marley and the Wailers, but it's seen as the very first salvo, and it's a complete masterpiece.
Catch a Fire didn't catch fire, to be perfectly honest. It was a sort of a medium success. It certainly wasn't the success I think that Chris had been looking for, but it did start to penetrate the market a little bit, and it certainly got Bob noticed. I mean, around the time of, I guess it must have been between Catch a Fire and Burnin, there was a fantastic, what you might call a showcase gig at the Speakeasy in London, which was not particularly well attended, to be honest, but you know, anybody that I've met since then who was there was, you know, it's one of their significant moment gigs.
Well, the first meeting I had with Bob was basically through my fascination for photography. I knew from a very early age, I think it was from I was about 9 when I saw a photograph being developed and printed, and from that moment I knew I wanted to be a photographer. And I was very fortunate enough to belong to a choir in the East End who had a photographic club, and that's how I discovered photography. So from then I wanted to be a photographer, and the man who ran the photography club, called Mr. Patterson, Donald Patterson, he saw my enthusiasm and really encouraged me, and used to loan me like Leicas and things like that, which, you know. So again, I was fortunate to be using really good equipment. And then, like I said, on weekends when there were like weddings or blues parties, again, you know, listening to Bob's music and people getting excited about it. And also at the same time, I was also starting to read sort of English music papers like Enemy, Melody Maker, and there was like little sprinkles about you know, about him in there. So I read in I think it was Melody Maker, that he was coming over to do his first tour. So I just decided to go down to the club where he was playing, called the Speakeasy, and just waited for him with my camera. Eventually he turned up, and I said, "Can I take a picture?" He said, "Yeah, man, come in." And the adventure for me started from there, really. When I first met him, I remembered just the aura he had about him. He had an incredible aura. Very friendly, very open, I think he was really pleased to see me in some ways, and in some ways that there I was with a camera, wanting to take pictures of him. Not that he was thinking of being a star in that sense, but the fact that I knew that there was something worth being a part of. And that particular tour was quite a groundbreaking tour, really, because I think, from what I realise now, the record company were trying to break Bob out of the West Indian community to a wider audience. So they put him on a tour which was like, they were playing like Mecca halls, like Blackpool, Mecca, Brighton, all these kind of places. And they were really for rock bands, reggae bands that never reached the heights of playing those places. So it's really weird, because at the time, Bob would be playing like in Blackpool in a Mecca hall, and which could probably take 2,000 people, and there's probably 200 people. But he went out there playing as if it was sold out, you know, because he had this thing that you could see that he wanted to deliver a message. And one morning they woke up, and it was quite early into the tour, and they wanted to play football, and they opened the curtains, and it was snowing, and they'd never seen snow before. And they had this argument between them where Peter, Burnin was saying there's like a sign from Jah they should leave Babylon and go back to Jamaica. And Bob was going to say, no, we have to continue the message. And I'm saying, it's only snow, you know. It's only snow, you can go and play football. So, well, football I talk about, man. Watch the snow at this, a Babylon this. And the tour collapsed. And they went home, and that was it. You know, and I went back, went home, and had a great set of pictures. But at the time, nobody was interested because there was no tour.
The Burnin album, there was really a large number of songs that were available because Bob had been writing for years and years, and there were lots of other artists who had done various songs of his. So there was plenty of material. It wasn't a matter of waiting for him to write another album or anything bizarre like that.
They came over with quite a few versions of different songs that they'd recorded, and on some of them we even edited between, because we dumped everything onto a 16 track, and we often edited between different takes. I Shot the Sheriff is cut across 3 different versions, and then we'd overdub, you know, Rabbit and the odd keyboard and say speed things up, add vocals. So they were finished off in London, but the basics were done in Jamaica. There was a bit of discussion where we sped things up as to, is this, you know, I remember Bob Marley not being too pleased about that initially, but Blackwell obviously must have convinced him it was a good idea.
Sheriff John Brown, always a time. For what I never know.
They were real tough street kids from Trenchtown, you know. So for me personally, I was 23, I think, when I did Burnin. I found the language really difficult. I couldn't understand a lot of what they were saying with the patois. It took me a while to adjust to that. And these were street kids. Yeah, they were pretty tough guys. So, I mean, I think it was, from my point of view, it was, yeah, you just try not to mess up and get it done, get it right. You've got your boss who's directly producing it, a bunch of guys that are pretty heavy. But I loved the songs, you know. As soon as we started copying them onto 16 track, you could tell there were some great lyrics, great songs.
When we were recording I Shot the Sheriff, and Bob kept singing I shot the sheriff, but I didn't shot the deputy. And I kept saying in my white middle-class way, you know, it's don't shoot the deputy, you know. And of course, every time I ran the tape, he'd sing the same thing. And then I suddenly realised, stop it, don't be so stupid, you know.
Why I shot the sheriff? Lord, I didn't shoot the deputy.
There's a huge amount of dancing, I remember, in the control room. The rest of the band, you know, just dancing to the music, even Blackwell, which is brilliant. Because I don't think people think of some, you know, 30-year-old owner of a record company as being a kind of a dancer. But there was a lot of dancing, a lot of good atmosphere.
Oh, yeah.
And it may sound a bit crazy, but I remember that, you know, he could kind of walk into the room and you wouldn't even, you know, be behind you or something, and you would know he'd come into the room. You know, it didn't work with any of the other Wailers, but there was something about Bob where you kind of sensed his presence. So I kind of remember that as in this, because we're in a room, I mean, smaller than this. It was a small room, the control room at Basin Street. If you had 10 people in there, it would be pretty busy, you know. But that's what I remember mainly of that, just this presence of this guy. And yeah, he had something to say, you know.
One of my other very amusing memories, actually, of the whole thing, and I've always thought it gives a very, very good impression of how Bob was. He was a bit of a mischievous kind of guy, you know. It was quite sunny, summery when we were recording the Burnin album, and Basin Street Studios had a flat roof that you could go out on, and a bit like the Apple building, I guess, but nobody did any gigs up there. It wasn't quite big enough. We'd all gone up there in a break because somebody'd come in from one of the UK music magazines to interview Bob, and we all sat on the roof. And this guy was asking questions, pretty stupid questions. He obviously hadn't done too much research and really wasn't quite au fait with what reggae was or who Bob was. And Bob had this massive, great conical spliff going as usual. And, you know, unusually, he kind of passed this across to the journalist, who was obviously quite impressed with this, and took a couple of really, really big hits on this thing, believing it, I imagine, to be a typical British joint. And you sort of kind of saw him glaze over as this full-strength Jamaican herb hit him. And he just turned into a bit of a gibbering wreck and passed the spliff back to Bob, and there's just this little smile came on the corner of Bob's mouth, and the interview was over. And he, you know, in the nicest possible way, he brought an end to the interview.
They had a big suitcase of grass, you know, but that was part of their religion for a start. What they don't tell you about is that they shipped over water from Kingston Harbour to wash their hair in, because that was also part of what they did. So there were big, you know, 100-gallon tins or whatever it was, you know, of water and a suitcase of grass, but it was just part of their lifestyle. And none of us thought anything of it at the time, you know.
When I came in, Bob Marley developed a reputation of being unreliable around the world. And it was only because of Chris Blackwell keep sending people, friends, associates. He sent them direct, he sent them indirect. He had them around Bob to be involved in the management of Bob. People that he could control, so that he would have the ultimate control over Bob. Now Bob, being as astute as he saw all of this. Chris didn't know that Bob was that. You see, Chris was a living argument that Bob was stupid. So Bob saw all of this. So Bob would never cooperate with them. They would commit things for Bob, and he wouldn't just show up because he never agreed to go in the first place. They thought he agreed to go, but he, in his mind, never agreed. Like when he walked off the Sly Stone tour and stuff like that. You know, he did one show, and then they just walked off and come home. That was him. After he was able to recruit me and had me known that I could not be bought and felt comfortable with me, he never missed a day. He behaved well. He created one of the best performances as an artist. He played every day, never missed a day, made all his interviews, cooperated with everybody, and became a superstar because of that.
The belly full, but we hungry. A hungry mob is a hungry mob. A rain or fall, but they don't it up. A pot of cook, but the food not up. You're going to chop to jam music. We're chucking. Oh, we chucking to jam music.
Natty Dread was the first Bob Marley record to really sell in significant amounts. And it's significant, I say Bob Marley, because by then it's Bob Marley and the Wailers. It isn't the Wailers. Peter Tosh and Bunny Livingston, or Bunny Wailer as he later became known, they've flown the coop because Peter was very difficult to work with. Bunny just didn't like flying, and it's holding everything up.
Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and Bunny Wailer were saying the same things, but the people didn't felt it from Peter, didn't feel it from Peter, didn't feel it from Bunny. They felt it from Bob, because he was saying it from here. They were just saying it for Redrick. He was saying it because he really believed in it, and people feels it.
He kept saying that they had a message to deliver, and whatever it takes, they must carry on going through. I'm not saying that Peter or Bunny weren't committed, but to them, they couldn't see why it was worth, to go through that kind of hardship. But Bob, you could see he had something in him that's saying, no matter what, regardless, I'm going to continue.
Natty Dread like in a Babylon. Natty Dread, I dread like a Babylon. Natty Dread, oh children, get your coat off. Natty Dread, and don't stay there and just stop. Natty Dread, for the battle will be hot. Natty Dread.
It was more single-minded, it was more focused. It was, if you like, it was the first Bob Marley superstar album, even though he wasn't a superstar yet. This was the one that served notice of where he was going. There was a single-minded quality about it. You could see what direction it was moving in, whereby Burnin, the album before, was a lot better than Catch a Fire, but it was still very much Bob, Peter and Bunny, which kind of, I think, ended up as being a bit self-defeating. A song like Natty Dread, and calling the album Natty Dread, with a big full-face painting of him with dreadlocks. By this time, I think this was the first time he had kind of appeared with proper dreadlocks. It's one of those things. There weren't actually a lot of dreadlocks about at that time. People assume there was, but if you look at a film like The Harder They Come, there's very, very few dreadlocks in it in 1972. So it was one of those things. It was an announcement of, right, here I am, this is what dreadlocks are about. Therefore it became this kind of, Natty Dread became almost a metaphor for Bob Marley.
He was very aware of the use of images, which very few reggae musicians were at the time. I remember sometimes doing sessions with some reggae musicians, and the idea of doing pictures was like, complete waste of time, where's the money? But Bob understood the use of images. He really understood that.
I think one of the reasons that Bob projected himself to a mainstream audience so well was he redefined the Wailers from three blokes who sung to one bloke out the front who had a guitar around his neck, which is kind of very easy for a rock audience to understand. I think after Peter and Bunny left, yes, there was the group there was the Barrett brothers, they added Al Anderson and Tyrone Downey, but I think they were essentially Bob's backing band. I think if one of them walked in here now, we wouldn't recognise him. I don't think anybody could have picked them out in the lineup. I do think the I3s were important, though.
The I3s, who are comprised of Rita Marley, Judy Moat and Marcia Griffiths, came in as a sort of counterpoint really to Bob and as a substitute really for the voices of Peter and Bunny, and they do it very effectively indeed.
They gave this kind of projection of kind of Rasta womanhood or whatever with their long dresses and red, green and gold head wraps. That was something that was a visual focus. Their harmonising was very, very important to Bob because essentially they replaced the other two.
until the philosophy which holds one race superior and another inferior.
He was always himself, you know, he gave up himself to the people, and that is what they wanted. He was never a person that you could look at and say, he's a show-off, or he's nothing like that. He's always himself, natural, and the humblest and the poorest could always go to Bob and speak to him and say anything to him and get anything from him. He would never snub anyone.
He was a father to the children, a father to the old, a father to everyone.
I think I3 was a really good development in the perspective of the music, because it gave a wider appeal to the backing vocals, and it gave a wider appeal to the sound. That was one of the good developments in the way that the sound moved forward.
I think by the mid-70s, Bob was making political commentary as a world citizen rather than a Jamaican citizen. Jamaican music has always had social commentary in it. It's a folk music still, quite simply because the people who make it, the people who produce it, and the people who consume it are all so close to each other that you can't fail but reflect what goes on around you.
Coming from the early records, a lot of his concerns was centred around Jamaica, and then from the beginning of the success, where he was starting to do a lot more travelling, and he was like an ambassador, you know, in many sense, and he was travelling around the world. He saw more of world politics, more of world needs in that sense, and you could hear that in a lot of the later albums as he developed, as people do as an artist, as a musician, in that sense. You know, as he drew in and took in more influences, became more aware of things.
He soaked stuff up like a sponge that was around him. He saw what was going on, he listened to people, he talked to people, and then started reflecting problems or making statements on a far more global or widespread level, rather than be totally parochial about it. It was even beyond racial at this point.
On the one hand, he was able to get across messages, whether it was emotional messages or political messages, but without ramming them down people's throats. And he had the ear for the catchy tune, if you like.
People like Bob Marcus Garvey, His Imperial Majesty, Martin Luther, you know, Stephen Biko, people like those, you can't erase them. You know, no matter how many years they pass. I mean, the more years added is the more respect and heritage is given to them.
I don't think he knew what he was, but he knew he was something, because he knew he wasn't a superstar. That he knew, because he always got upset when people referred to him as a superstar or treated him or set a lifestyle for him as a superstar lifestyle. He tried all his life to maintain, even at the height of his success, to maintain an ordinary person status, dealing with ordinary people, talking to ordinary people, living as ordinary as you can, going to New York and not having limousines, taking taxis, walking up and down where people can touch him. People see him in the street, they can stop and talk to him. I mean, he maintained that. And he always, every time the superstar thing come up, he always said to me, Don, I'm not a superstar, you know. I'm not in the superstar business. So he saw himself as something. He referred to himself as a messenger. That's what he liked to refer to himself as, is that he was a messenger.
We all see him as a prophet through his music. And he's someone that could prophesy things that would happen, because being such a spiritual person and a person that is so close to the Almighty God, the Father would signal him, you know, as to what is going to happen prior to when it happened. So he was that kind of person, clairvoyant, if you should call it that.
When Bob and the Wailers played the Lyceum in the summer of 1975. A live album is recorded and got out very, very quickly. It's a sharp move, really, on the part of Chris Blackwell, because Natty Dread is in the charts. It is a hit. It's a top 10 record. And this really kind of underpins it, because the record really captures the magic of that night. The album is totally unmessed around with, really. It was recorded over 2 nights. The first night, the audience invaded the stage, so we lost most of what we could use that night. And the second night, we kind of bolted a few mics to the floor and did it slightly differently. And the concert comes from the second night. But the I3's vocal mic went down during the concert, so we did have to repair that. But apart from that, it was, yeah, the gig is the gig, you know.
I was trying to get work as a photographer, and I was finding it very difficult. And when he came back to England to do the famous Lyceum concert, the record company, I got in touch with the record company, and Bob remembered me, so I got a photo pass. So there I was at that point in the photo pits at the Lyceum, and there were like all the top rock photographers like Barry Plummer and whatever, you know, was there, and there I was with my, and it was like, who the hell is he? You know, that kind of thing. But it was amazing, because I knew his performances from before, so I had that edge.
Live the Up Yourself and No Woman No Cry stood out for me as being just great versions. No Woman No Cry especially, I think, it's one of the best versions they had from the Lyceum. Well, from all their live gigs, it was just a particular version that just felt great. And the audience were brilliant, because they all sang along. There was an energy on that one. Well, on all the gig, but those particular 2 stood out as being great tracks.
The Lyceum as a gig was an incredible performance. I mean, all kinds of things happened. It was so packed and it was so hot in there that what happened at one stage was the steam from the body heat went up to hit the ceiling and came down as if it was raining. I mean, there's all kinds of things are happening there, you know, it's incredible.
In this great future, you can't forget your past. So dry your tears, I say.
He was saying lyrics that he wrote. A lot of acts are doing lyrics that other people write. They have to choreograph to that. This is his old thing, this is him. So he has more control, more belief, more stamina, more everything. And he was a good performer, and he really believed it. All Bob Marley did, you know, on stage was like he was playing football in his yard. All his moves were football moves. You know, he didn't do anything. He didn't choreograph anything or do anything. It's just natural, like he trained in the jumping. It's just like he was training, or he was playing when he was on stage. It's like he played football or something. That's all he was doing. He wasn't doing anything but he fitted it with what he felt. He moved. Bob never moved the same way twice, because he didn't feel the same way all the time.
That was the gig which made him. You know, from that gig, everybody wanted pictures of him. And I was the only one that had photographs of him prior to that gig. So suddenly I was thrown into the music industry.
Yeah, I still listen to that album, strange enough, because there's a lot of stuff you work on that you never go back to listen to. But the Lyceum, on certain days, it's just the best buzz there is. You know, it makes you feel up and happy, and it's a good album.
It was the next day after that gig, really, when we had a reunion as such. We met he was staying in a house, a flat in King's Road, and the reunion was like, you know, like how was it, what I thought of it, you know, that kind of thing, you know what I mean? It was, and I said, yeah, man, you're the king.
People played Bob Marley very stupid, but the man was practical and simple. He knew exactly what he wanted, he knew where he was going, and he knew who he needed to get him there. And he was only going to get there when he was ready to get there. You wasn't going to push him there, you wasn't going to do it. He got there when he was ready, when he felt he had everything under his control.
Until the philosophy which all one race superior and another discredited and abandoned. Well, everywhere is war.
With Rastaman Vibration coming so soon, relatively speaking, after the kind of highs of Live at the Lyceum and that, really just wasn't a very good album. I just don't think he had many songs to go on it. People talk about it as being underrated or underappreciated, and it's kind of not really. It wasn't very good.
I think Rastaman Vibration is actually Bob Marley's best album of all. And interestingly, it was his first record to make the American top 10. And those songs like the title track or War, which sets to music, a speech by Haile Selassie at the United Nations in 1968, are absolutely masterful tunes. I think it's his best ever record, by far.
The basic human rights or equality guaranteed to all without regard to race. This is a war. But until that day, the dream of lasting peace, world of citizenship, and the rule of international morality, yeah.
I think with the touring schedules, with what he was doing, I don't think he had time to write the songs with due consideration. So many of the other records had songs that already existed, finished off and put on, or revamped and put on, and this one didn't. And I think his schedule of it was virtually 2 albums a year was just too much. There weren't any songs on that album, or no songs that were new enough, were interesting enough. You kind of felt you heard it all before and better than that.
Bob creates things and then he forgets it because he didn't put things on tape, and he said that's because God didn't want him to put things on tape. So if he forgot something, he would get something better. And then he would, like a lot of his songs, Rock the Boat and stuff, or songs that he had written like 15 years before I met him, and then finally once he got into his own, he took them and reworked them and tightened them up and brought them back. So Bob had 9 ways of doing every song. Bob could take a song and do it 9 ways with 9 different titles. Just switch the words around, same word, just move 1 or 2 words there, and it sounds different.
Bob Marley always tried to remove himself from the cutthroat world of Jamaican politics. He didn't want to associate himself too closely with either Michael Manley's People's National Party or Edward Seaga's Jamaican Labour Party, which in fact, typical Jamaican paradox, is far more right-wing than the People's National Party, the PNP. But everyone knew that Bob's heart was more with Manley, with the kind of left-wing politics of Manley. By 1976, there was an undeclared civil war going on with a huge body count. So it was with some reluctance that Bob Marley agreed to play the Smile Jamaica concert, scheduled for December the 5th, 1976. In Kingston, because it was associated with Michael Manley. So I suppose we should not see it as any great surprise that on December the 3rd, 2 days before, Bob is, as he would do regularly, he's rehearsing at his headquarters at 56 Hope Road, which is in uptown Kingston, on the way up into the Blue Mountains. It's like early evening. Bob is in his studio. He's peeling a grapefruit, and Don Taylor, his manager, is in the room as well. When suddenly these guys burst in and start firing at them, loosing off lead at them.
That was one of the most frightening moments for him. I think that was one of the things that wasn't on the drawing board. You didn't expect that. You planned for everything else, but that never even crossed into the realms of things. That just didn't exist. That was a frightening moment. That kind of brought everything to reality, you know, just woke you up and brought you to reality.
He moved to England at that point, and oddly, that was the silver lining in that particular cloud, because an album like Exodus couldn't have happened anywhere other than England. So, as a result, he could live in safety, he could live in a musical environment that fostered what he wanted to do, he could live away from all the kind of day-to-day nonsense that goes on in Kingston. He had Cindy Breakspear in a flat just down the road, so life was very, very good for Bob at that time. You know, as a result of a truly appalling circumstances, he turned up in a very, very comfortable environment, one that I think led an awful lot towards the sort of musical liberation and the personal liberation that went into Exodus.
There's a natural mystic flowing through the air. If you listen carefully now, you will hear. This could be the first trumpet, might as well be the last. Many more will have to suffer, many more will have to die. Don't ask me why.
For me, Natural Mystic, the opening tune on Exodus, with its apocalyptic vision, is one of the greatest songs that Bob Marley ever recorded, and I love the way it kind of fades in. Instead of fading out at the end, it fades into the entire album.
I think when he took a song like Natural Mystic and opened, I think there's a couple of tours he opened with it, it was just a statement. There's a natural mystic flowing through us. Look, we're all together on this one, you know, we're somehow spiritually connected. This was, I should imagine, a genuine sentiment. I mean, he did love his audience, regardless of how he performed for them, both on and off stage. He loved them. He wanted to do his best for them, and I believe he genuinely felt this connection, and that was the Natural Mystic, was this ethereal connection between him and his crowd.
There's a natural mystic flowing through the air. I won't tell no lie.
The thing about the Exodus album is he's not addressing any particular point. This is just like, it's Bob's manifesto. There's bits of everything in there. There's love songs, there's militant songs, there's just everyday party songs. It was a reflection on Bob's life at the time, talking about hard times that people of the world struggling, people moving about, the Exodus, talking to some of the great love songs on there, because say he had Miss World, Cindy Breakspear, was living just down the road from him. He was playing football every afternoon, he was just hanging out, he was having fun, he was going to clubs, going to see shows. It was, from that point of view, it was his personal manifesto.
I think that the Exodus album, in fact, is the best known of all Bob Marley's albums. All the drama connected with Exodus, the shooting that had led to it, this big tour that supports it, and of course, sadly, we also know that, you know, Bob's problem with his foot began to grow much worse during that tour, somehow cemented it in people's imaginations as really the quintessential Bob Marley album. I mean, Time magazine described it as, you know, the album of the century.
I was there the day when he got the injury. It was in Germany. They had a day off, and they were playing, and so he got tackled, and the nail came out from the big toe, and it wouldn't heal for months and months, and then it started from there. No, but no one thought that would have been, you know, it was just an injury in that sense.
there was a notion with Kaya that it was a softer version of Bob Marley, and there's a certain truth in this as well. They're mainly love songs, but also the ganja plant on the front cover would also seem to say quite a lot about the state of mind of the record.
It's not a very good album, and I think any criticism levelled at it was not unwarranted, just maybe a bit misdirected, as he hadn't gone soft. He just had run out of songs at that time.
A lot of it was written in Miami, where Bob went to stay with his mother after the Exodus tour. He lived in Miami for about 5 months. But I think consciously, he, and I think Chris Blackwell had a say in this as well. In fact, I know he did. They decided to keep away from political themes and even too much mention of Rastafari, because Bob wanted to go back to Jamaica. He couldn't be on, he was kind of on the run from Jamaica, and he wanted to go back. So, you know, there is a slight subtext to the material on Kaya.
I shouldn't imagine that he would have took any notice of anybody telling him to cool it on the political statements, in spite of rumours that were going around at the time. I think, to be quite honest, he was just very happy at that time. He'd become a global superstar. He was enjoying life. He had money in his pocket. He had his children were growing up around him. He's had his relationship with Miss World, or ex-Miss World by then, Cindy Breakspear. He was, I think he was just like a happy bunny.
Artists will do anything to be successful to get money, not him. He would rather just fail and keep getting the word out 2 at a time than get money. If the money comes, he wants it, but he's not selling out for the money. His philosophy was that everything in the world belonged to who he thought was his father, the Almighty. And that's all it is. So he doesn't really need any. He only needs what he needs. He needs to eat, he needs to wear, he needs to, travel. That's it.
I think by the time he got to Survival, and I think he was quite ill by then, life and being Bob Marley in general must have been taking an awful toll on him, because it's not, I wouldn't say it's not a very good album. It's not a very upful album. It's not very lively. It's a bit like the weight of the world is on this bloke's shoulders. It's not what you'd come to expect from Bob Marley. It's not what you'd come to expect from someone who was going to show you the way out of however, bad your life was. He was either going to protest on your behalf or give you a bit of a dance or help you in a romantic situation. And this just kind of wasn't. It was a bit like, I don't think he was tired. And he probably was. I mean, remember, the 90% of his fan base had no idea how ill he was until he died.
There's a sense about Bob Marley always of kind of that he was psychic, that he was prescient, that he knew what was going on, and I'm sure he had a sense of what was going on with his own body, because he drove himself incredibly hard, rarely more than 3 or 4 hours sleep at night. Sleep is for fools, you can sleep when you're dead. Bob was pushing himself to the max because he had to get this stuff out. He had to get this message out. He knew that. So that's really what Uprising is. It's kind of his last will and testament. And the music on Uprising, of course, ends with the final tune, which is Redemption Song, which seems like this valedictory work, and also seems like a look back and an encapsulation of everything that he'd done.
All pirates, yes, they rob I, sold I to the merchant ships. Minutes after day took I from the bottomless pit, but my hand was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly.
This really was roots reggae in its essence, whereas Bob Marley had redefined his own reggae and therefore redefined what a lot of people thought reggae was, because by this point he's virtually existing within a vacuum. Redemption Song was one of the few that actually got back to a very sort of simple, way of doing it. You can imagine sort of 2 or 3 Rastamen sitting about on an upturned fishing boat and just banging on things and singing this song. I thought it was one of the best things he did in his later career, simply because it got back to, I think, the essence of what Bob used to be before he had to court an international audience. But of course, that was what people arrived at Bob Marley for in the first place. Therefore, to actually go back to it connected in a way that I think surprised a lot of people.
Won't you help to sing another song of freedom? 'Cause all I ever have, redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind.
That photograph was taken in Carlos Place. It was the last time we met in 1981. And quite sad really, because I went to see him and walked into the room, and it wasn't the usual, he wasn't his usual self. He wasn't winding me up like he would, call me English boy and, whatever, I mean, he just wasn't the same. And we sat down and we started talking, and I know somewhere I kind of felt as if he was wondering what it was really all about, if all the effort was, I didn't really know what was going on, to be honest with you. I had no idea what was going on with him. He just wasn't the same. And then he picked up the guitar and started playing the guitar, and I was taking pictures of him, and I didn't realize that the song at the time he was playing was Redemption Song until after he died, and and I heard it and I realized he was playing the Redemption Song. Quite a sad moment really.
Sold I to the merchant ships. Minutes after they took I from the bottomless pit, but my hand was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly.
The death of Bob Marley had sort of several consequences. I mean, one of which was that people said that reggae music died with Bob Marley's and that nothing was ever any good anymore. Absolutely untrue. Incredible reggae comes out, all the time.
My father sing reggae music, but it's not him alone used to sing it, and there was other artists who sing reggae music in a different style than my father. So reggae music was never Bob Marley music or Jimmy Cliff music. Everybody did have their own style. So the same thing now. Things come, everybody have their own style. You have the dancehall style, which is a style of the reggae music, and you have a next man who sing cultural or what have you, whatever you want to call it. So there was always a different way of approaching the music ever since. It was never Bob alone, and it will never be one person alone who deal with this thing. It's a people music. It's not a one-man music or a one-girl music. Yes, people music.
Won't you help to sing another song of freedom? 'Cause all I ever have, redemption songs, redemption songs.
Marley the man is perhaps thought about far more than Marley the musician, and that's probably not without good reason. If you look at the amount of albums he did, there's probably 10 in the Marley catalogue in an incredibly short space of time. So 10 albums, 150 songs. Yet what we're probably only ever talking about is 6 or 7 of them. It doesn't really matter. I mean, he made enough good music for us to remember him by.
All around the world you see the image of Bob Marley. Perhaps the only other person who you would see in a similar way is Elvis Presley, but no one else rather than those two have really hit the unconscious of the planet in that way.
You can go through the ghettos of Jamaica, not just Trenchtown, the ghettos of Jamaica, and you'll see two pictures, either Haile Selassie and Bob Marley, or a picture of Jesus Christ and Bob Marley. I'm telling you, but Bob Marley's not going to be not on that wall, trust me.
I think his legacy really is the notion that, well, actually, kind of most of us can do anything if we try, and it's a legacy of optimism, of hope.
Bob has done his thing, but Bob is ever present. Ever.
Long live Bob Marley. And them are going tired to see him face. Them can't get him out of the race, because he's here to stay.